You have probably encountered situation in your life when you start practicing piano and everything goes well until the very moment when you suddenly realize that while your fingers keep moving, your mind is already somewhere else, recalling a movie that you have watched yesterday or seeking arguments how to convince your relatives that vaccines don't turn Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in one's body. So in this video, I will mention a few very important tips how to get most from your practicing session. If you want to maintain the high level of playing, or if you want to keep developing it, expanding repertoire and building new skills, you'll need to keep practicing. There is no great musician who stays in a great shape without practicing regularly. However, how much you will have to practice and how much you will be able to do within one practice session depends heavily on the discipline of your mind and on your practicing strategies. When a student comes to a teacher and tells, "Look, I can't play this spot, something doesn't work," the most common answer, unfortunately, that they might hear is, go practice. Go practice until you can play it. What's your problem? But I believe that I, as a teacher, should provide my students not only with the idea how should it sound, but also how to practice it, how to get there. And usually for tricky spots, I suggest mastering them in a few stages because piano playing is a complex activity. And in order to play something brilliantly, we have to use different parts of our brain and synchronize them, because memorizing something is one thing and appealing to your memory, to your memorization compartment of your brain is one thing. Resolving technical difficulties, coordinating motions, all this technical work is another part of our brain. And of course, creativity, creating a vibrant, convincing interpretation, that's just another part of our brain. So in order to master something complex, we have to break it into stages. And in this video, I will show you examples how you can do that. And I actually do teach online, so if you're interested to study with me, please contact me using the link in the description to this video. And also check out my comprehensive courses dedicated to certain pieces or certain aspects of piano playing on teachable.com. The link is also below. So what is very important to keep in mind, two things that will be motto for this video. First one, any work takes a time allotted to this work. That's why if you want to master something fast, just set up a deadline for yourself. And the second one is that practicing is always a problem solving. So before playing anything, before starting practicing, you have to set up yourself a very clear goal. A goal that you can achieve within, let's say, 5 to 15 minutes. Something very local. For example, memorizing 2 bars or fixing one passage. Something that you can quickly get done. And then as soon as you done it, move forward, set up a next goal. Just avoid repetitions, avoid mechanical practicing when you don't really know what you're doing, but you just kind of seeking what to do with the piece. And let me throw a few tips that I find personally very important for practicing piano and for mastering new pieces efficiently and quickly. So tip number 1, the best way to become familiar with a piece is to listen to a recording, to a performance of this piece. Some people would criticize this method, but honestly, all these counter arguments, they don't withhold any substantial critique. So if you want to get the piece quickly in your ears, listen to different recordings, different performances, and follow the score with your eyes. The next step is, of course, defining the structure of the piece. You have to understand how the piece is structured, because very often a piece has a lot of repeats. So just understanding where do you have a repeat section or where you have similarities might help you to understand that maybe it's not so much work actually ahead. Then, of course, it also helps to define the most difficult parts of a piece, because it's not reasonable to practice a piece from the beginning to the end each time. You have to start from the most difficult sections and master them first and then move to the easiest sections. Then, of course, you have to shorten difficult things and simplify them, break them down into simpler elements that you can comprehend, because we can't really master, we can't memorize efficiently something what we don't understand. That's why we break things into small chunks of information in order to learn them faster. If you play a spot, for example, 8 bars long, and you play it through, and somewhere between bars 4 and 5, you've got a problem, you made a mistake. What most of people would do automatically is, of course, starting the section again from the bar 1 and play it again through in hope that this time they will somehow magically overfly this problematic spot. And that it will resolve itself on its own, which doesn't happen, of course. So they get stuck there again, and they start again from the bar 1, go to bar 5, make a mistake, and go in circles. And then after half an hour of practicing like that, you say yourself, "Oh, I worked so hard, but this spot is unbearable. It's so difficult. No, I'm done. I go for a beer now." So what you have do in that situation is extract that very spot that is problematic, that gives you hard time. Just start one beat before, and you master just that very small fragment where you make mistake. As soon as you fix it, you start one bar before and see, can you play it through or not? If that goes well, you start 4 bars before and see how you can overcome this spot. Now, if the problem stays, you zoom in again, fix that particular spot, start 1 bar in advance, check if everything is okay, and then start 4 bars in advance, check if everything is okay. So it's very important to extract the cause and find the issue and fix it first instead of endlessly repeating a larger section. Then, of course, we have to be very creative in learning difficult spots. And I will be speaking more about difficult memory types later in this video, but let's have an example, for example, from Brahms Concerto No. 1, which I'm working on right now. And there is a spot that is not really comfortable. Spot sounds like that. And so on. And in order to master it, there is especially one part that is tricky. This one. It doesn't sound too crazy, but it's kind of uncomfortable to play. And in order to minimize risks, we have to zoom in and be very creative in how do we actually learn this spot. So for example, at first we can learn it in pairs, synchronizing movements, making sure that each particular group is comfortable to play. Then we can play them still in pairs, in groups of 2 notes, but marking strong beats, because this spot is written in triplets, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So in order to really know where the strong beats are, I'm going to play it in groups of 2 notes, but marking strong beats. So it will be like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So you see, I'm playing lightly everything, but strong beats. And then we can learn it in groups of 2 still, but oppositely. So disconnecting the first one and grouping them from kind of upside down. So making sure that I feel comfortable grouping them like that. And then same thing, but marking strong beats again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And then, for example, learning it in groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, pa-bum-bum, pa-bum, and always releasing the hands in between and coordinating motions in such a way that I would feel myself really comfortable playing that spot. And then, of course, for example, confusing yourself even more, even further. For example, playing beats 3 and 5 and skipping beats 4 and 6 in order to make sure that you really know it from all sides. So, pom pom pom, pom pom pom, and then oppositely, you skip beats 3 and 5 and you play beats 4 and 6. So pa-dum pom, pa-dum pom. And then, of course, for example, playing just one voice. So and then a middle voice. So I try to really approach this passage from different sides, because when you get on stage, you don't want to have some spot that you know you can play only every second time, in hope that now it will be that second time and not the first one when you usually fail. So when you get on stage, you really want to be sure that you have a control over everything. That's why it's important to address issues and fix things if you feel that you're not sure somewhere. Then if you work in smaller parts, for example, if you learn a piece bar by bar, it's very important to follow continuity rule, a so-called continuity rule when you play, for example, a short segment, let's say a bar, but you don't stop on a bar line. You always play till the first note of the next group. For example, let's say you're learning a Mozart sonata and you work on that piece bar by bar. So you have one bar, and then you have another bar, and another bar, and another bar. So you don't stop in between. You always play till the first note of the next group. Here, and you stop here, and then you start from this same note, and you lead it to the first note of the next position. This is very important because in most of cases, when students learn a piece, they memorize it exactly as they see it in bars. Here I have one bar, here I have another bar, here I have the third bar. And within a bar, they play it perfectly. But when they have to connect it and play in a flow, they have this kind of lagging between bars and some stops between bars, which is similar to a video game, you know, when you move to another area and the game needs like a few seconds in order to preload next map. So you're kind of stuck and then you can go further. So this is a bad habit we have to get rid of as soon as possible, and that's why continuity rule is a great help. Always learning till the first note of next group. While mastering technically difficult spots, I would suggest you getting to the real speed as quickly as possible, but in short fragments. So for example, when you work on some uncomfortable spot like this, Prelude by Chopin, it's quite uncomfortable, and of course it's difficult to play it perfectly in tempo from the beginning. So I would suggest you to combine different tempi. When you play the piece through, you play it in a comfortable tempo, coordinating your motions. But also, simultaneously, I would suggest you to try to lift this to a real tempo, but in short fragments. For example, just 4 notes, and then following the continuity rule, and the next group. This way of practicing is really good because you have an opportunity to notice which group, for example, is the worst one, so you can concentrate on it. And also playing in shorter segments allows you to control whether you are playing this in good quality or not. Then the fastest way to master a new skill, to master a new piece, is of course learning hands separately. So I really advise you, when you have something complex, something difficult to memorize, just learn different hands separately first. That's the quickest way to master pieces, and this is scientifically proved actually. Then I have a special video about 4 different memory types. So the trick is that if you really want to learn something quickly and be sure about this piece, you have to use different types of memory, and you have to train different types of memory, because many people tend to learn pieces using just one type of memory, for example, motor memory. So many students learn a piece with their fingers only, without much thinking, without much reflecting on what they are playing, and then they come to a lesson, they have just a little bit of stress. And the problem with motor memory is that when you have just a little bit of stress, even a little bit of stress, it fails. So then they suddenly make a lot of mistakes, and they tell me, I played it perfectly without you, and now in front of you I can't play. So I feel myself like guilty that I am the issue. But the issue is that if you want to play something with a good level of stability, you have to approach this work from different sides, training different memory types. And motor memory is great, is important to develop from day one, as I have shown, already trying to lift the piece to a real tempo. But you have to reinforce your knowledge with other memory types. I have a special video about that. Check out on my channel. And here I will mention just a few brief points about that. So what is very important about motor memory is that from the very beginning we have to seek for comfortable sensation. So the stage one of your learning a piece should be finding comfort, should be coordinating motions and resolving them. That's why I would suggest you to start practicing a piece from a comfortable tempo and from a comfortable dynamics. Because usually we get tense when we either play too loud or very softly. That's why, for example, these uncomfortable spots from Chopin's Prelude, I would start mastering it with a comfortable tempo and playing it mezzo forte. Making sure that I coordinate motions properly, transfer the weight properly, have a good connection to the keys. And as soon as I feel myself comfortable, I start moving a tempo, start lifting a tempo gradually, and just working on dynamics after I have resolved principal technical difficulties. Because if you would start working on artistic aspects of a piece before resolving technical difficulties, most probably you will get just much more tense. And you will learn that tension, and then later you will always play this piece with a great amount of tension. So at first, getting rid of tension, resolving difficulties, and then on that base, you already start adding other dimensions like artistic ideas, interpretation, working on dynamics, and so on. A few words about analytical memory. So it's really useful to understand what you are playing. That's why theory of music is really helpful. So if you have some idea about music theory rules, about chords, inversions, keys, and so on, it's of course very helpful because you can recognize structures, you can recognize chord progression, and thus you will be able to learn a piece faster. And even if you don't possess a solid knowledge in music theory, you nevertheless might work on piece analyzing what's happening. For example, there is a spot from Mozart's sonata in C major, Sonata Facile, and most of people don't have any problems with memorizing this piece, but there is one spot that gives a hard time to many students. It sounds like... So in order to memorize it, in order to never have any issues with this part, we have to understand harmonies. We have to understand harmonic progression and understand where harmonies change. So beats number 1 and 2, they represent just a G major. So my task here is just to understand that I have a G major chord here. Yeah, and keep in mind this pattern on the keyboard. Just see it, visualize it. And then as soon as I come to beat number 3, I have a C major pattern. And then diminished chord, B minor. So analyzing the piece like that and playing it through as a harmonic skeleton first, as a harmonic progression, helps me to better understand what's happening here. And usually that's already enough in order to get rid of any memorization problems. If you have something difficult, if you have something very complex, then you reduce it. You make a reduction, playing just the most essential stuff and leaving aside, let's say, more complex things. Like, for example, Brahms Concerto No. 1 that I'm working on, and I hope to produce a detailed course on this piece soon. And there is a spot that might be tricky for many pianists. So in order to master it quicker, we would break these complex tasks that includes polyrhythms, that includes various technical challenges like these leaps in the right hand and so on. We would proceed like one task at a time. For example, at first, just understanding the chord progression. For that, I would play the left hand, not as it is written, but gathering all these sounds in chords and playing just the chord progression and understanding what's happening here. So we have a D major, dominant towards D major, or back, dominant, modulation towards G major, diminished, and then diminished chord, D major. So at first making sure that I understand this chord progression. Then, for example, you play this chord progression in the left hand, still playing it in chords, and the melody in the right hand. Making sure that I understand this chord progression, and making sure that I can play just a basic accompaniment, this chord progression plus melody. Then, for example, working on polyrhythms in the right hand. So at first concentrating on just synchronization. So I don't think much about expressiveness, about interpretation. My task here is just to make it rhythmically clear. Meanwhile, while working the right hand, of course, resolving technical difficulties and finding appropriate motions, coordinating motions for these uncomfortable leaps that are actually getting comfortable as soon as you find a correct motion. And on my channel, of course, I dedicate a lot of time to coordination of movements, to technique optimization. So check out my courses and videos on that topic. And only then, when I have done all these steps, I would synchronize hands together. And then, when I feel myself comfortable and when I really have memorized the spot really well, I would continue polishing the interpretation, playing with rubato, playing with dynamics, and so on and so on. So it is important to make your work in steps, clearly understanding the goal of each particular step and breaking complex things into smaller things, not trying to swallow an elephant at once, but going through the piece in steps. There is always a certain amount of progress that you can do within one spot, one section, in a day. And that's why it's not reasonable to repeat it endlessly, like 100 of times, because anyway, doesn't matter how much times you will repeat it right now. Most probably it will go only to your short memory compartment. And in order to convert it, in order to transfer it to a long-term memory compartment, you would have to simply return to this spot a few days in a row, giving yourself a time to sleep on it, to reproduce this information on the background of your mind. That's why when you learn a piece, I would suggest play 4 bars, set a clear goal, for example, playing 4 bars without mistake. But as soon as you have done it, at least, let's say, once or twice, don't try to repeat it more times than that. Go immediately to the new section, because our brain is actually a very lazy and it tries to work as little as possible. That's why quite often you might catch yourself on an attitude like when you have learned 4 bars and you already know them more or less, and instead of moving to the next section, you might tell yourself like, yeah, I know that already, but it's not perfect. Let me just keep working on it. And you keep repeating these 4 bars that has become your comfort zone again and again. And this is just a trick of our mind to avoid going out of that comfort zone, to avoid starting a new section, because starting a new section, it's an effort. It would need you to concentrate again. And we have to track such habits and just make yourself a rule. As soon as you have done something a few times, a couple of times, just move on immediately. Don't get stuck on one spot. Try to cover as much spots as possible, repeating them not too many times. Especially because when you work on a piece, your progress would look something like that. So the first 5 minutes, if you work on a spot with a good concentration, you would make that much of a progress during the first 5, let's say 5-7 minutes. Maybe 10 minutes, okay. And then if you keep working on that same spot for another 10 minutes, you will get that much of a progress on top, because your attention span is already getting lower. And if you will keep pushing, you're not going to make any progress anymore. In fact, you will decrease. So you will go down. You will play it worse and worse. That's why it's important to notice when you get tired from a spot, when you has reached your limit of improving the spot for today, and just leave it. Switch to another task, make another spot. And tomorrow you will return to that spot, you will quickly repeat what you have done yesterday, and you will quickly add another good portion of development to that spot. And this is way more efficient than just keeping repeating the same spot endlessly in hope that you will do everything within one day, which is most probably not the case. There's a great book about piano efficiency, about piano learning that I personally very like and find it very helpful, although some of my students think that it's a bit controversial. But nevertheless, I would recommend you to look into it. It's called Fundamentals of Piano Practice, written by... I forgot the name of the guy, but I will leave you the link in the description in case you want to discover more helpful learning strategies. I hope that this was helpful and gave you some fresh ideas. Have fun playing piano, and see you next time.